The HOA president stood on my doorstep at 7 in the morning, holding a clipboard like it was a weapon, and I knew my peaceful Saturday was about to go straight to hell. "Derek Davidson, we need to talk about your generator," she said, pushing past me into my foyer without waiting for an invitation. Her name was Patricia Henderson, and she had been the bane of every homeowner's existence in the Meadowbrook Heights subdivision since she took over the HOA board 3 years ago. I stepped back, coffee mug still in hand, trying to process what was happening. "My generator, what about it?" Patricia turned to face me, her perfectly coiffed blonde hair not moving an inch despite the early morning breeze. She was probably in her mid-50s, always dressed like she was about to attend a country club luncheon, even on a Saturday morning. Today, she wore a pale pink cardigan set that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "The community center's generator failed during the storm last week," she announced, scanning my living room with barely concealed disdain. "The board has decided that since you own the most powerful backup generator in the neighborhood, it would be appropriate for you to donate it to the community center for everyone's benefit." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Donate? Patricia, that generator cost me $15,000. I bought it for my home workshop because I run a custom furniture business out of my garage, and I cannot afford to lose power during critical projects." "Community needs come first, Derek," she said, tapping her pen against the clipboard. "Besides, according to our records, you barely use your workshop anymore since you opened that location across town 6 months ago." That was technically true. I had expanded my business and rented a larger workshop space in the industrial district of Phoenix, about 20 minutes away. But I still used my home garage for smaller projects and personal work. The generator was essential for both locations, and I rotated it depending on where I needed it most. "I use my workshop here regularly," I countered. "And even if I didn't, that generator is my personal property. The HOA has no right to demand I hand it over." Patricia's smile could have frozen lava. "Actually, if you review Section 12, subsection 4 of the HOA covenant, you'll see that all residents must contribute to community welfare when deemed necessary by the board. We're deeming this necessary." That section refers to maintaining common areas and paying dues, not confiscating personal property worth thousands of dollars. The board disagrees with your interpretation. She pulled a formal letter from her clipboard and handed it to me. "You have until Monday at 5 p.m. to relocate the generator to the community center. Failure to comply will result in fines of $500 per day until you comply." I stared at the letter, my blood pressure rising with each word I read. This was insane. The HOA had pulled some ridiculous stunts before, demanding certain paint colors and mailbox styles, but this was outright theft dressed up in bureaucratic language. "I'll be fighting this," I said firmly. "That's your right," Patricia replied, already heading toward my door. "But the fines will accumulate during any appeal process. Have a wonderful weekend, Derek." She left, and I stood there fuming, reading and rereading the absurd letter. My phone rang almost immediately. It was my neighbor, Tom Rodriguez, who lived 3 houses down. "Dude, did Patricia just leave your place?" he asked. "What did the wicked witch want now?" "You won't believe this," I said, walking back to my kitchen to pour another cup of coffee. I was going to need it. "She's demanding I donate my generator to the community center." "Your $15,000 industrial generator. The hell she is. She claims it's for the community good and that they can fine me $500 a day if I don't hand it over by Monday evening." Tom let out a low whistle. "That's completely illegal. She can't just take your property." "I know that, and you know that, but Patricia thinks the HOA covenant gives her the authority of a feudal lord. What are you going to do? I looked out my kitchen window toward my detached garage, where the generator sat in its dedicated alcove, hardwired into my electrical system. I'm going to move it to my workshop across town. If it's not on the property, they can't take it. Brilliant. Need help? Actually, yeah. This thing weighs about 800 pounds. I'm going to need to rent a trailer and get a few people to help load it. I'm in. Let me call Mike from the gym. He owes me a favor and he's built like a tank. By noon, I had assembled a crew of 4 people. Tom, Mike from the gym, my business partner Julie Donovan, and Julie's husband Carl. We met at my house with a rented utility trailer hooked to my truck. The generator was a beast, a Generac industrial model that could power my entire house or workshop for days on end. It ran on natural gas and had enough output to handle all my power tools simultaneously, which was crucial when I had multiple pieces of equipment running during complex projects. Okay, we need to disconnect it from the gas line first, I said, opening the access panel. Then we can unbolt it from the mounting pad. Julie, who was about 40 with short dark hair and the organizational skills of a military general, started taking photos with her phone. Document everything. If Patricia tries to claim you damaged HOA property or violated some code, you'll want proof you did this properly. She was right. Julie had been my business partner for 2 years, and her attention to detail had saved us from numerous headaches. She ran the business side while I focused on the craft work. It took us about 2 hours to safely disconnect everything. The gas line required careful attention, and I wanted to make sure I capped everything properly. The last thing I needed was the HOA claiming I'd created a safety hazard. This thing really weighs 800 pounds. Mike grunted as we maneuvered the generator onto a heavy-duty dolly. Mike was a personal trainer, about 6'4", and even he was straining. Welcome to industrial equipment, I said, guiding the back end. Watch the corner here. We slowly wheeled it down my driveway, carefully navigating the slight slope. Several neighbors had come out to watch, and I could see curtains twitching in windows all along the street. News traveled fast in Meadowbrook Heights. Derek, is this about Patricia's generator demand? Called out Janet Williams from across the street. She was in her 70s, one of the original residents who had lived here long before the HOA became tyrannical. Sure is, Janet, I replied. I'm relocating it to my other workshop. Good for you. That woman has gone too far this time. She tried to fine me last month because my rose bushes were 3 inches taller than the approved height. 3 inches. She measured them with a tape measure. Several other neighbors voiced their support as we loaded the generator onto the trailer. It was nice to know I wasn't alone in my frustration with Patricia's reign of terror. Make sure you secure it really well, Carl said, helping me ratchet down the heavy-duty straps. You don't want that thing shifting on the freeway. Carl was a mechanical engineer and understood the physics of hauling heavy equipment. We used 6 separate ratchet straps, crisscrossing them to create a web that would keep the generator stable during transport. My workshop across town was located in an industrial area near the Phoenix airport. I had rented a 2,000-square-foot space in a converted warehouse building, sharing the structure with a metal fabrication shop, an auto body repair business, and a small craft brewery. The rent was reasonable, the power was reliable, and none of my neighbors cared what hours I kept or how loud my equipment got. The drive took about 25 minutes, and I checked my mirrors constantly to make sure the generator stayed secure. Tom followed behind in his own truck, serving as a safety vehicle in case anything went wrong. When we arrived at the workshop, Julie was already there, having driven ahead to open up. She had cleared a space in the corner of the workshop where we could set up the generator. "I called an electrician," she said as we started unloading. "Danny said he could come by tomorrow afternoon to do the hookup properly. He'll need to install a transfer switch and run the connections." "Tomorrow's Sunday," I said. "He's charging us time and a half, but he said it's worth it given the circumstances." I filled him in on the HOA situation. "Perfect. Thank you." Getting the generator off the trailer and into position was almost as challenging as loading it had been. The workshop floor was concrete, which helped, but maneuvering 800 pounds of equipment through a standard door required patience and careful coordination. "Pivot," Tom yelled, echoing that famous scene from an old TV show. Despite the situation's stress, we all laughed. Once the generator was in place, we took a break. I ordered pizza for everyone, and we sat around my workshop eating and discussing the absurdity of the HOA's demand. "You should fight this," Julie said, biting into a slice of pepperoni. "What they're doing is illegal." HOAs can enforce reasonable rules about property maintenance and aesthetics, but they can't just confiscate your belongings. "I plan to," I said. "I'm going to contact a lawyer Monday morning, but in the meantime, the generator is safe here." "What if Patricia shows up at your house Monday night expecting to find it?" Mike asked. "Then she'll be disappointed." I pulled out my phone and showed them a photo I had taken of the empty space where the generator had been. I documented the proper disconnection and removal. Everything was done safely and to code. She can't claim I created a hazard or damaged anything. Sunday afternoon, Danny the electrician showed up as promised. He was a guy in his 30s with a tool belt that looked like it weighed as much as the generator and a no-nonsense attitude I appreciated. "Julie filled me in," he said, surveying the generator and the workshop's electrical panel. "HOA president wants to steal your backup power, huh? That's about the size of it. Man, I hate HOAs. My brother lives in one that fined him for parking his work van in his own driveway." Danny shook his head and got to work. "This is a nice unit. You're running it on natural gas. At home I was. Here, can we convert it to propane? I don't think this building has natural gas service." "Absolutely. Actually, propane might be better for a workshop setting. You can keep tanks outside and it's easier to monitor fuel levels." He examined the generator's fuel system. "I'll need to order a conversion kit. Should be here Tuesday. I can do the electrical hookup today and finish the fuel system later this week." "That works for me." Danny worked through the afternoon, installing a transfer switch and running the necessary electrical connections. The workshop had a substantial electrical service, more than adequate for the generator's output. "You're all set on the electrical side," Danny announced around 6 p.m. "Once I get the propane system set up, you'll have full backup power. This thing could run your entire workshop for a week straight if needed." I paid him for the day's work, and he promised to call me when the conversion kit arrived. Julie had already left to have dinner with Carl, so I spent some time organizing my workshop and thinking about my next move. Monday morning, I was ready. I had an appointment with a lawyer at 9 a.m., and I was prepared to take the HOA to task for their outrageous demand. The law office was in downtown Phoenix, in one of those modern glass buildings that reflected the desert sun like a mirror. Robert Chambers was his name, and he specialized in HOA disputes. His receptionist led me to a corner office with a view of the city skyline. "Mr. Davidson," Robert said, shaking my hand. He was probably in his 40s, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, with the confident air of someone who knew his specialty inside and out. "Tell me about this generator situation." I laid out everything, showing him Patricia's letter, the HOA covenant section she had cited, and my documentation of the generator's removal to my workshop. Robert read through the materials carefully, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and shook his head. This is one of the more egregious overreaches I've seen from an HOA board, and believe me, I've seen plenty. They have absolutely no legal authority to confiscate your personal property, regardless of how they interpret their covenant. So what are my options? Several. First, we can send them a cease and desist letter, making it clear that any attempt to fine you or take your property will result in legal action. Second, we can file a complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate, which oversees HOA operations. Third, if they do try to impose fines, we can sue for harassment and abuse of authority. I want to do all three. Good. I'll draft the cease and desist today and send it certified mail. It should arrive by Wednesday. We'll also file the complaint with the state. As for the lawsuit, let's see how they respond first. Sometimes a strong legal pushback is enough to make an overreaching HOA board back down. And if they don't back down, then we take them to court and you'll likely win. Cases like this typically result in the HOA being ordered to cease their actions, pay your legal fees, and sometimes pay additional damages for harassment. It also often triggers an investigation into the HOA's overall operations, which can lead to board members being removed. That sounded satisfying. Let's do it. Robert and I spent the next hour going over details and signing paperwork. By the time I left his office, I felt more confident about the situation. The generator was safe in my workshop. I had legal representation, and Patricia was about to get a very unpleasant surprise. I was back at my house by 1 p.m., and Patricia was already waiting for me. She stood in my driveway with two other board members I recognized, Susan Martinez and Bill Crawford. All three held clipboards, and Patricia looked like she was ready to conduct an inspection. "Derek, we need to verify the generator's installation at the community center," Patricia announced as I got out of my truck. "There's nothing to verify because the generator isn't going to the community center." Patricia's expression hardened. "Then you're refusing to comply with the board's directive." "I'm refusing to have my personal property confiscated, yes." "This is community property," she insisted. "No, it's not. I purchased it with my own money for my own business use. It has never been community property." Susan, who was younger than Patricia but equally rigid in her adherence to HOA rules, chimed in. "The covenant requires all residents to contribute to community welfare. That section refers to maintaining common areas and paying dues, not surrendering private property." "My lawyer agrees, and you'll be receiving a cease and desist letter later this week." Bill, who had been silent until now, frowned. "You got a lawyer involved." The HOA demanded I hand over $15,000 worth of equipment with no compensation. "What did you expect?" Patricia's face flushed. "The board has the authority to make decisions in the community's best interest." "The board has the authority granted by law and the covenant," I corrected. "And that authority doesn't include theft." "This isn't theft. This is community resource allocation." "Call it whatever you want, Patricia. My lawyer calls it illegal confiscation of personal property, and the Arizona Department of Real Estate is going to be very interested in your interpretation of HOA authority." For the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker across Patricia's face. Susan and Bill exchanged glances. "Where is the generator now?" Patricia demanded. "Not on this property, which means it's not subject to HOA jurisdiction." "You removed HOA property." "I removed my property. I have documentation showing I purchased it, installed it, maintained it, and properly disconnected it. Every step was done safely and to code. You have no claim to it. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue further, but Bill put a hand on her arm. Patricia, maybe we should consult with the HOA's attorney before we proceed. We don't need an attorney. The covenant is clear. The covenant has never been tested on property confiscation, Bill said carefully. Derek's right that this could be problematic. Susan nodded slowly. My husband mentioned that HOAs can face serious penalties for overstepping their authority. Maybe we should table this until we get legal advice. Patricia glared at both of them. Fine. But Derek, you're still in violation of the board's directive. We'll be imposing fines starting tomorrow. Go ahead, I said calmly. My lawyer is looking forward to adding those to the harassment lawsuit. They left, and I went inside, my heart pounding. Standing up to Patricia was nerve-wracking, but I wasn't going to let her bully me into surrendering my property. Tom called me that evening. Dude, I heard Patricia and her cronies were at your place this afternoon. How did it go? About as well as expected. She's threatening fines. I mentioned lawyers, and she turned an interesting shade of purple. Tom laughed. I wish I'd been there to see it. Hey, you should know that half the neighborhood is talking about this. People are pretty impressed you're standing up to her. I'm just protecting my property. Yeah, but you're also the first person to really fight back. Most people just pay the fines or comply because it's easier. Patricia's gotten used to everyone rolling over. Well, she picked the wrong property to try to confiscate. Tuesday morning, I received an email from Patricia with an attached fine notice, $500 for the first day of non-compliance. I forwarded it immediately to Robert Chambers. He called me 20 minutes later. Perfect. This actually strengthens our case. They're imposing punitive fines for your refusal to surrender personal property. Keep any additional notices they send. Will do. Also, I've drafted the cease and desist letter. I'm sending it today by certified mail and email. The state complaint will be filed tomorrow. Wednesday afternoon, I was at my workshop across town, working on a custom dining table for a client, when Julie came in looking concerned. Derek, I just got a weird call. Someone claiming to be from the HOA asking about our business location and whether we store personal property here. Let me guess. A woman with an overly sweet voice. Exactly. That would be Susan Martinez, probably trying to figure out where I moved the generator. What did you want me to tell them if they call back? Nothing. Our business location isn't their concern. We're a private business renting private commercial space outside their jurisdiction. Good, because I was planning to tell them to pound sand. I grinned. Julie had a diplomatic side when dealing with clients, but she had no patience for bureaucratic nonsense. Thursday morning, Patricia showed up at my house again. This time she was alone and she looked stressed. Derek, we need to talk reasonably about this situation, she said when I answered the door. I'm listening. The board received your lawyer's letter. We also received a notice from the state that our operations are under review. Good. This doesn't have to become a legal battle. If you would just cooperate and provide the generator for community use, we could resolve this amicably. Patricia, I'm not giving you my generator. It's not happening. You have no legal right to it, and you know it. What if the HOA compensated you for its use? What kind of compensation? We could waive your HOA dues for a year. I almost laughed. My HOA dues were $150 a month. She was offering me $1,800 worth of waived dues in exchange for a $15,000 generator. No deal. Even if you compensated me for the full value of the generator, I wouldn't agree because I need it for my business. You have a workshop across town. You don't need a generator here anymore. How I use my property, and where I choose to keep my equipment isn't your business, Patricia. The generator is mine, and it's staying mine." Her expression hardened again. "You're being unreasonable." "I'm being unreasonable. You demanded I hand over $15,000 worth of equipment, and you think I'm unreasonable for refusing. The community needs a generator. Then the community should purchase one with HOA funds. That's what reserve funds are for. We don't have that kind of money in the reserves. That's a management problem, not my problem." Patricia left without another word, and I could see her shoulders tight with frustration as she walked back to her car. Friday afternoon, Robert called with an update. "The HOA's attorney contacted me. They want to negotiate a settlement." "What kind of settlement?" "They're willing to drop the fines and rescind their demand for the generator if you agree not to pursue legal action or file complaints." "Absolutely not. They don't get to threaten me, impose illegal fines, and then walk away clean just because they got caught." "That was my assumption, but I wanted to check." "I told them we're proceeding with all actions unless they're willing to offer a real settlement, which would include a formal apology, payment of all legal fees to date, a guarantee that this board will never make similar demands of any resident, and oversight to ensure compliance." "What did they say?" "They're considering their options." Translation: they're trying to figure out if they can still win this or if they need to cut their losses. "Let me know what they decide." The following Monday, I received another fine notice, another $500. I forwarded it to Robert with a brief note. "They're doubling down," he replied. "Perfect. We'll add it to the damages." That Wednesday, Danny called to let me know the propane conversion kit had arrived and he could finish the generator installation that weekend. I met him at the workshop Saturday morning, and we spent several hours completing the propane system setup. "You're fully operational now," Danny announced, testing the generator. It roared to life, smooth and powerful, exactly as it should. "You've got 400 gallons of propane in those tanks outside, which should give you several days of continuous operation if you ever need it." "Hopefully, I won't need it continuously, but it's good to know I'm covered." The generator purred away for a few minutes as Danny checked all the connections and verified the transfer switch was working properly. Everything was perfect. "You know," Danny said as he packed up his tools, "Patricia actually called my office." "What?" "Yeah, she somehow found out I was the electrician working on your generator setup. She tried to get me to tell her where it was located." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that client information is confidential and hung up, but man, she's persistent. That's one word for it." Over the next 2 weeks, Patricia sent me 3 more fine notices. The total was now $3,000. She also sent several emails demanding I reveal the generator's location and return it to the community center. I forwarded everything to Robert and ignored her attempts to engage. In mid-March, about 5 weeks after this whole mess started, Robert called with significant news. "The state investigation has found multiple violations in how your HOA board operates. Patricia and her board have been misusing their authority in several ways, not just with your generator situation." "What kind of violations?" "Improper fine assessments, failure to follow their own bylaws for board decisions, misappropriation of reserve funds, and several other issues. The state is requiring the board to undergo compliance training, implement oversight measures, and hold a special election for board positions. So Patricia might get voted out, very likely, given how unhappy the residents are. But there's more. The investigation found that Patricia actually did misappropriate reserve funds. She used about $8,000 from the community reserve account for personal expenses. She embezzled from the HOA. That's exactly what she did. The state has referred the matter to local law enforcement. The Phoenix Police Department's white-collar crime unit is now involved. I sat down heavily. I didn't expect it to go this far. Financial crimes in HOA management are taken seriously in Arizona. If the evidence supports criminal charges, Patricia could face prosecution. 2 days later, on a Thursday morning, I was at my home workshop working on a small project when I saw police cars pull up to Patricia's house, which was 6 streets over but visible from my driveway. I watched as 2 officers escorted her out in handcuffs. Tom called me immediately. "Are you seeing this?" "Yeah, I'm watching right now. The cops just arrested Patricia. What the hell happened?" "She embezzled from the HOA reserve fund. The state investigation uncovered it during their review of the board's operations." "Holy shit." "This all started because she wanted your generator. And now she's probably facing criminal charges. Karma's funny that way." The neighborhood was buzzing with activity. People came out of their houses, gathering in small groups to discuss what they'd just witnessed. I saw Susan Martinez standing in front of Patricia's house, looking shell-shocked. That evening, I received an email from Bill Crawford, the only remaining active board member. Susan had apparently resigned immediately after Patricia's arrest. The email was brief and to the point. "Derek, on behalf of the HOA board, I apologize for the distress and inconvenience caused by our inappropriate demands regarding your generator. All fines have been rescinded. The board recognizes that we overstepped our authority, and we are taking steps to ensure this doesn't happen again. We hope to resolve this matter without further legal action." I forwarded the email to Robert. He called me 30 minutes later. "This is a good first step, but it's not enough. We need them to put this in a formal settlement agreement, acknowledge their violations in writing, pay your legal fees, and agree to policy changes that prevent this kind of overreach in the future. Whatever you think is appropriate." Over the next week, Robert negotiated with the HOA's attorney. Patricia remained in jail, unable to make bail, while the investigation into her financial crimes continued. The local news picked up the story, and it became a cautionary tale about HOA corruption. A reporter from a Phoenix television station even contacted me for an interview. I declined, not wanting to become the face of the story, but the coverage was extensive anyway. It turned out Patricia had been involved in several questionable financial decisions over the years, and my generator dispute had simply triggered the investigation that unraveled everything. In early April, Robert called with the final settlement terms. "The HOA has agreed to pay your legal fees, which total $4,200. They've also agreed to put $5,000 into your account as compensation for the harassment and stress caused by their illegal demands. Additionally, they're implementing new board governance policies that require financial oversight, limit the board's authority to impose fines, and create a resident appeal process for disputed decisions." That sounds fair. There's one more thing. The HOA is asking if you would be willing to serve on the new board after the special election. Several residents nominated you. I thought about it for a moment. Being on the HOA board would take time and energy, but it would also give me a voice in preventing future abuses. "I'll consider it, but I'm not making any promises." The special election was held in late April. The turnout was unprecedented, with over 80% of residents voting. When the results came in, the new board consisted of 5 members who had all campaigned on reforming the HOA's operations and preventing the kind of overreach Patricia had engaged in. I had ultimately decided not to run, but Tom did, and he won a seat. So did Janet Williams, my elderly neighbor who had been fighting Patricia's ridiculous rules for years. Patricia's criminal trial was scheduled for August. The evidence against her was substantial, and her attorney was reportedly negotiating a plea deal. She faced multiple counts of embezzlement and fraud, with potential prison time if convicted. On a sunny Saturday in mid-May, I was at my workshop across town, putting the finishing touches on a custom bookshelf for a client, when Julie walked in with coffee and donuts. "Thought you might need sustenance," she said, setting them down on my workbench. "You're a lifesaver." I took a chocolate glazed and bit into it gratefully. "So, I've been thinking about the generator situation," Julie said. "What about it?" The whole mess ended up being the best thing that could have happened to the neighborhood. Patricia's gone, the board has real oversight now, and residents actually have a say in decisions again. I suppose that's true. Though I would have preferred not to spend months dealing with lawyers and threats. But you stood up for yourself and it made a difference. How many people just would have handed over the generator or paid the fines? Probably most people. It was easier than fighting. Exactly. You did the hard thing, and it exposed corruption that had been going on for years. I thought about that while I worked on the bookshelf. Julie was right. My refusal to surrender my property had triggered an investigation that revealed Patricia's financial crimes. If I had just complied, she would still be running the HOA, still embezzling funds, still making residents miserable with her arbitrary rules. Memorial Day weekend. The new HOA board organized a community barbecue at the center, the first social event in years that wasn't stiff and formal. Tom, in his new role as board treasurer, made sure to invite me personally. "You have to come, man. You're basically a neighborhood hero." "I'm not a hero. I just didn't want to lose my generator. You exposed a corrupt HOA president and helped reform the whole system." That's hero stuff in my book. I went to the barbecue, bringing a potato salad, my mom's recipe that was always popular at gatherings. The community center was packed with residents, many of whom I'd never actually met despite living in the neighborhood for 5 years. Janet Williams cornered me near the grill. "Derek, I wanted to thank you personally. I've been trying to fight Patricia's nonsense for 3 years and I kept getting shut down. What you did gave the rest of us courage to speak up." "I appreciate that, Janet. But really, I was just protecting my property." Sometimes that's all it takes to start a movement. One person saying no when everyone else is too afraid. Throughout the afternoon, several other residents approached me with similar thanks. A younger couple mentioned that Patricia had threatened to fine them for having a vegetable garden in their backyard, claiming it violated aesthetic standards. An older man told me about the time Patricia tried to ban him from parking his classic car in his own driveway. The stories went on, painting a picture of systemic abuse that had gone unchecked for years. My generator dispute had been the catalyst that finally brought it all to light. In late June, Patricia accepted a plea deal. She pled guilty to 3 counts of embezzlement and 2 counts of fraud. The sentence was 3 years in prison and restitution of all stolen funds plus penalties. She would also be permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in Arizona. Tom called me when the news broke. "Did you hear? Patricia's going to prison." I heard. 3 years. Part of me feels bad for her. But then, I remember she tried to steal your generator and embezzled $8,000 from the neighborhood, and I feel less bad. She made her choices. All of this could have been avoided if she just acted within her authority and followed the law. True. Hey, the board is planning to use some of the recovered embezzled funds to purchase a generator for the community center. The real way, with HOA money and a proper vote. That's good. That's how it should have been done from the start. In July, I completed the custom dining table that had been my main project through all the drama. It was a beautiful piece, crafted from reclaimed oak with intricate inlay work. The clients were thrilled, and it ended up being featured in a local home design magazine. Business was booming at both my home workshop and my larger space across town. The generator, safely installed with its propane system, had proven its worth several times over. We'd had a couple of brief power outages during monsoon storms, and the generator had kicked in flawlessly, keeping my tools running and projects on schedule. On a warm evening in early August, I sat on my back patio with a cold beer, reflecting on the past 6 months. What had started as an absurd demand from an overreaching HOA president had turned into a neighborhood revolution, criminal prosecution, and systematic reform. My generator hummed quietly in my workshop across town, powering equipment and protecting my business. It was exactly where it should be, under my control and serving my needs. Julie and Carl came over for dinner that evening, bringing steaks to grill and good wine to share. We sat around my patio table as the sun set, casting long shadows across my yard. "To standing your ground," Julie said, raising her glass. "To having good friends who help you move 800-pound generators," I countered. "To corrupt HOA presidents getting what they deserve," Carl added. We clinked glasses and drank, and I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not because I'd won some battle or exposed corruption, but because I'd simply refused to be bullied into giving up something that was rightfully mine. The neighborhood had changed in the months since Patricia's arrest. The new board operated transparently, with open meetings and resident input. Fines were only issued for legitimate violations, and residents had a clear appeal process. The community center got its generator, purchased properly with community funds and a unanimous vote. Tom's time on the board had given him a new perspective. "You know what's crazy?" he said at a board meeting I attended as an observer. "Running an HOA properly isn't actually that hard. You just have to follow the rules, respect people's property rights, and not be a power-hungry control freak." Apparently that last part was too difficult for Patricia, Janet observed dryly. In September, I received a letter from the Arizona Department of Real Estate. They thanked me for filing the initial complaint that had led to the investigation and subsequent reforms. The letter noted that my case had become a model for how HOA oversight should work, protecting homeowners from abuse while ensuring communities could still function effectively. I framed the letter and hung it in my workshop, not as a trophy but as a reminder. A reminder that sometimes doing the right thing is inconvenient and stressful, but it's still worth doing. A reminder that standing up to bullies, even bureaucratic ones with clipboards and covenants, matters. The generator continued to serve me well, powering my business and protecting my investments. Every time I heard it kick on during a power outage, I thought about Patricia's face when I told her no. I thought about how one person's refusal to comply with an unjust demand can ripple outward, creating change far beyond what they initially imagined. By October, life had returned to a comfortable rhythm. My business was thriving, the neighborhood was functioning better than it had in years, and I no longer dreaded seeing HOA-related mail in my mailbox. Tom hosted a small dinner party in mid-October, inviting the core group who had helped me move the generator all those months ago. Mike came with his girlfriend. Julie and Carl brought dessert. We gathered around Tom's dining table, sharing a meal and laughing about the absurdity of everything that had happened. "Remember when Patricia said the generator was community property?" Tom said, still finding it hilarious. "I thought you were going to have a stroke right there on your driveway." "I was close," I admitted. That was the moment I knew this was going to be a fight. "Best decision you made," Mike said. "If you'd caved, Patricia would still be running the neighborhood like her personal fiefdom." "And stealing from the reserve fund," Julie added. "Don't forget that part." As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Tom pulled me aside. "I wanted you to know that the board approved something tonight. We're naming the community center's new generator in honor of your stand against corruption. There's going to be a small plaque acknowledging that proper HOA governance protects everyone's rights." "Tom, you don't have to do that. We already did. The plaque's being made as we speak. Besides, it's not just for you. It's a reminder to future boards that they serve the community, not rule it." I didn't know what to say to that. The whole situation still felt surreal sometimes, like something that happened to someone else. As November arrived and the weather finally cooled in Phoenix, I found myself busier than ever with custom orders. Apparently, word had spread about my craftsmanship, and I was booking projects 3 months out. One afternoon, while I was at my across-town workshop assembling a complex entertainment center, a young couple came by to discuss a potential commission. They wanted custom cabinets for their kitchen, and they'd heard I did excellent work. "We also heard you're the guy who stood up to that crazy HOA president," the wife said as we discussed design options. "That was me," I confirmed, "though I was really just protecting my equipment. Still, it's impressive. We're actually looking at houses in your neighborhood now that the HOA situation has been resolved. We'd heard horror stories before, but everyone says it's much better now." "It is. The new board is reasonable and transparent. It's actually what an HOA should be." They ended up hiring me for the cabinet project, and we scheduled the work to begin in January. As they left, I realized that the generator dispute had affected my business in unexpected ways. People saw me as someone who stood up for what was right, and that reputation had value. December brought the holidays and a sense of closure. Patricia was serving her sentence in a minimum security facility, the neighborhood was thriving under new leadership, and my generator was exactly where it belonged, in my workshop, powering my business and my dreams. On Christmas Eve, I was putting the finishing touches on a rocking chair I'd made as a gift for my mother when my phone rang. It was Robert Chambers, my attorney. "Derek, I wanted to wish you happy holidays and let you know that the final paperwork is done. The settlement is complete, and the case is officially closed." "That's great news, Robert. Thank you for everything you did." "It was my pleasure. Cases like yours are why I got into HOA law, standing up to abuse and corruption matters, and you did it the right way." After we hung up, I sat in my workshop, surrounded by sawdust and the smell of wood finish, and felt genuinely content. The journey from Patricia's absurd demand to this moment of peace had been challenging, but it had also been worthwhile. The rocking chair for my mom turned out beautifully, smooth curves and perfect joints, made with care and attention to detail. As I wrapped it for transport, I thought about how much can change in a year. How one person's refusal to accept an unjust demand can expose corruption, reform a system, and give a community back its voice. My generator sat in the corner of the workshop, ready to provide power whenever I needed it. It had never been about just a piece of equipment. It had been about the principle that people have rights, that property ownership means something, and that authority without accountability becomes tyranny. New Year's Eve found me at the neighborhood celebration, the first such event in years that felt genuinely festive rather than obligatory. The community center was decorated with lights and full of residents who actually wanted to be there, not people attending out of fear of HOA disapproval. Janet Williams raised a glass as midnight approached. to new beginnings and better governance. The crowd cheered, and as the countdown began, I looked around at my neighbors, people who had found their voices again after years of fear and intimidation. Tom caught my eye from across the room and nodded, a silent acknowledgement of how far we'd all come. As the new year arrived with cheers and celebration, I knew that my simple refusal to surrender my generator had been the right choice. Not just for me, but for everyone who had been silenced or intimidated by Patricia's abuse of power. The generator still hummed away in my workshop across town, a symbol of independence and the right to protect what's yours. It powered my business, fueled my success, and reminded me every day that standing up for yourself isn't just important for you. It's important for everyone who comes after. Patricia's attempt to confiscate my property had backfired spectacularly, exposing her crimes and liberating a neighborhood from her corrupt rule. Justice had been served, reforms had been implemented, and life was better for everyone involved, except Patricia, of course. But that was the consequence of her own choices, her own greed, and her own abuse of authority. She had learned the hard way that you can't just take what doesn't belong to you, no matter what position of power you hold. As for me and my generator, we were doing just fine, exactly where we should be, free from the demands of a corrupt HOA and ready to power whatever projects the future might bring.